in the terms of the history, I want to give you a little chronology. We could go by geography of the different parishes we had, or we could go by chronology. So I think to go with the historical context especially, I'd like to talk about 4 periods in the time of our mission there. So the first period was like the pioneers. There was Monsignor Tom Sevian, and there was a large crew of priests and nuns. There was a lay volunteer too. It was a papal volunteer, which is one of the ideas, especially in Princeps Pastorum, that of Blessed John the 23rd, about lay people participating in the mission. And this pioneer period really went up to the time of the Civil War. So I'd say between 1965 and 1979. And the violence then increased so much that the second period would be the time of the Civil War. And that Civil War obviously involved a lot of violence to third parties. It wasn't necessarily those who were in conflict that were suffering, because the church suffered a great deal too. So that, for instance, Oscar Romero in 1980 was assassinated while he was saying Mass at a chapel. And then that had a great impact. In fact, Bishop Hickey went to his funeral, at which there was another kind of disturbance and violence, and people died in a rush of people running away from bullets. And then, more important for us, I would say, the only thing that had more impact on us was the death of our 2 missionaries, Jean Donovan and Sister Dorothy Kazel. And then that violence became war, and it lasted 12 years. The 12 years of violence in El Salvador, during which we were there. The next phase of our mission, I'd say chronologically, would be the post-war period after the Accords of Peace, and there was a restructuring going on in El Salvador in general. It was a very interesting time. I was there for only part of it, but they had, all the institutions had to be revised, and there was the guerrilla force became a political party and was inserted into the life of the country. There's a Salvadoran intellectual who wrote a book about what happened after the war, and he called it La Reforma Pactada, meaning the agreed upon reform, and it was because it was a kind of a treaty thing that really happened. And then at that post-war period of Reconstruction really ended with a new phase in which the guerrilla party put forward a candidate who won the presidency. That was in 2009. And he was a CNN stringer. He worked for CNN Global News, and he was a very famous commentator on television. Wasn't a member of the party for a while, and then he joined. It was to give an impression of a new kind of system for the leadership, because the guerrilla forces originally were kind of very marked in their Marxist ideology. I worked in El Salvador for 20 years, a few days, maybe more. And they were in 2 stints, from 1986 to 1993, and then from 1998 to 2011. When I came back to the first time to Cleveland, Bishop Phyllis said, well, I'll think about sending you back eventually, just have to do some time here. And then after about 4 years that I was here, he said, are you thinking about going back? So actually I was able to go back, which was a real blessing for me. And so I'd like to talk about these 4 different periods just so you can have an idea of what our mission was doing. And some of the people remember this because in the UB in the 60s, there was constant reference to our mission. And a lot of people used to follow that. I remember as a kid, was following it. I remember Father Zeb, who was our associate pastor, talking about the mission in El Salvador, talking about the dramatic need of clergy, and also the fact that there was a real threat of the Protestant evangelization and other things happening in Latin America that the church really had to be worried about El Salvador. At the time, I was, I think, in 4th grade or something. I had wanted to be a missionary in China because we heard all the stories in religion class about the Chinese missionaries. So I thought, well, I'll put China on hold for a little bit, and then I'll go to El Salvador. I haven't made it to China yet.